We know that babies are very sensitive in utero and they're developing at a rapid rate. So what impacts a baby's development? What is going to impact their overall success with having a well-rounded sensory system, having good primitive reflex integration, and honestly, everything.
Everything, yes. And some we know, right?
Yes.
We know that smoking, drugs, trauma in utero, if mom is pregnant and she gets into a really bad car accident or toxic exposure, we know that those all have an impact because it's been very well studied. Diet can have an impact. So what mom is eating goes through her body and goes into baby. And so that can have a huge impact as well.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica, and this is All Things Sensory by Harkla.
We are both certified occupational therapy assistants, and together with Harkla, we are on a mission to empower parents, therapists, and educators to help raise confident and strong children of all abilities.
On this podcast, we chat about all things sensory, diving into special needs, occupational therapy, parenting, self-care, overall health and wellness, and so much more.
We are here to provide raw, honest, and fun strategies, ideas, and information for parents, therapists, and educators, as well as other professionals to implement into daily life.
Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, just a quick pause because we want to let you know we have an exciting live webinar coming your way on June 4th.
We are going to be talking all about sensory processing and how to create sensory diet routines. And we're going to talk specifically about summer, since that's an area or a time of the year where our sensory kids struggle a lot.
You will earn AOTA CEUs, 0.2 AOTA CEUs if you are a therapist and you take your post-test, but we would love to have you there. Even if you can't make it live, still register because you do get access to the recording, to the handouts, to the freebies, everything that we are sharing with you from this live webinar.
Yep, the link to sign up is below in the description, so we will see you there.
Okay, bye.
Hey there, welcome back to All Things Sensory by Harkla. We're so happy to have you here with us again. I'm Rachel.
I'm Jessica.
And today, this episode is dedicated to our fabulous, amazing videographer, podcast editor, just the brains behind the operation. She is currently pregnant and expecting a little human being, and we are talking today about supporting and nurturing your baby's nervous system, sensory system while they are in utero.
Yeah, we talk a lot about kids with sensory processing challenges and how to support our children with regulation and how to create sensory diets, but it's like the sensory system starts in utero.
Yeah.
The baby starts developing all of their sensory systems, primitive reflexes start developing all in utero. And so really, that's where we should be starting when we're talking about supporting our children.
Just a quick disclaimer, this is not medical advice. This is not, should be not used as a replacement for medical advice. Just
or therapy.
Just because we are talking a little bit more about medical topics, always talk to your doctor, your midwife, whoever you're seeing before you implement any of these things. And this is just things that we have learned over our careers, our own pregnancy journeys, and just what we have seen in our clinical experience as well. And we do include some research articles to back our claims as well.
Sure thing. Yeah.
Because we love the research.
Yeah. So first, let's talk about the different sensory systems that are developed in utero. The first is taste and smell. We know that these two systems are very connected to each other. When we eat something, we smell it. Taste buds actually begin to develop around 8 weeks. So Claire, baby's taste buds are already developed here. By around 13 to 15 weeks, the fetus can actually detect fluids in the amniotic fluid. The olfactory system, which is your sense of smell, starts to form around the same time. So baby could actually start to experience smells around the second trimester.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Okay, hearing is usually developed starting at 18 weeks to 24 weeks. And by 24 weeks, the fetus can respond to external sounds, and the auditory system continues to develop throughout the third trimester and as soon as baby is born. So another early one.
Yep. Now, the sense of touch, your tactile system, is actually one of the first senses to develop. And this can start around 8 weeks. So very similar to sense of taste. By around 12 weeks, most of the body is sensitive to touch. And by 32 weeks, baby can start to perceive pain.
Which I just think is so fascinating.
Yeah.
So fascinating. Okay.
Are you going to say that after everyone?
Yes, because it is so fascinating. Vision. Eyes begin to form in early pregnancy, but are not fully developed at birth. So we were actually just talking about this today. By around 20 weeks, the fetus can perceive light and dark. And by 28 weeks, the eyes can open and detect light changes, but vision is limited.
Yeah, we were talking about this because one of our coworkers just had a baby about a month ago, and she brought him in today, and we were talking about his vision and his eyes, and, you know, she brought him in the other day as well, and when I was holding him, he was just going cross-eyed, and I was like, oh, look at your little crossed eyes, which is very typical within that first month of life because those eye muscles are still working to develop.
Yeah, and our boss was holding the baby and feeding him, and he was like, why do babies just like to look at lights? You know, they just stare at lights. And I'm like, well, that's all they can really see. You know, I mean, think of like a blurred camera.
Yep.
They can't really see where they are. They can't see faces very well. They can see those high contrast things. So of course they're going to look just like moths, you know, they're just drawn to the light.
But they can hear.
They can hear.
And they can recognize.
And they can feel.
Sounds.
And they can smell. Mm-hmm. Yep. And they can lick you. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, they can taste you. They can.
Oh gosh. Yes. Vision.
Okay. Okay, so vestibular system, our sense of balance, this is located within our inner ears. So with head position changes, our vestibular system is activated. This starts to develop pretty early, but it's not fully understood in exact timing because baby, you know, is in one position, but then they start to move around and then they, you know.
And they're in fluid too.
And they're in fluid, so that changes things. But it's believed to start functioning by around the second trimester. That's when they start to move around more.
Yeah, and that connection with the auditory and the visual system too, those are all developing simultaneously. So, you know, I'm assuming it's probably close to the same time.
Probably.
Okay, the proprioceptive system, again, this one isn't as well documented and understood, but the proprioceptors, those begin to develop as the tissues form. So the differentiation of the muscle spindles, which are the components of the proprioceptive system, those start around the 9th week. So that's very early. The proprioceptive system continues to mature throughout pregnancy as the fetus grows and the muscles begin to become more defined. By the second trimester, the fetus begins to move more actively, indicating that the proprioceptive feedback mechanisms are functioning to some extent.
Along with the vestibular system.
Exactly.
Those are so connected.
Yeah, the tactile system. It's all connected.
It's all connected.
Okay, so we know that babies are very sensitive in utero and they're developing at a rapid rate. So what impacts a baby's development? What is going to impact their overall success with having a well-rounded sensory system, having good primitive reflex integration, and honestly, everything. And
everything, yes. And some we know, right?
Yes.
We know that smoking, drugs, trauma in utero, you know, if, you know, mom is pregnant and she gets into a really bad car accident or, you know, toxic exposure to toxins.
We can't talk today.
You know, we know that those all have an impact because it's been very well studied. Diet can have an impact. So what mom is eating, you know, goes through her body and goes into baby. And so that can have a huge impact as well.
Yes. Another one that I see clinically, there is some research that supports this, but bed rest and lack of movement as well. Or, you know, I don't think that you can overmove. I mean, you can always overdo it, but I think the biggest thing here is lack of movement, bed rest, baby's not getting the vestibular input, the movement, the turning, the ups, the downs, the rocking. And I mean, I'll just share like a personal experience with this one. I was working with a family who had 3 kids in OT, and I was working with one of the one of the kids, and I was talking with the mom, and she'd been in therapy for a long time. Like, she knew what was going on. Like, she was a really great client. And I remember her saying, I was asking about bed rest, and I was like, "What, were you on bed rest at all with the kid that I was working with specifically?" And she's like, "Oh, I was." And I think she was on bed rest with maybe a couple of her kiddos. I can't remember exactly, but I know she was on bed rest with this kiddo. And I was like, there's got to be an impact with the sensory system with bed rest. If the baby's not moving, if they're not getting that constant impact, they're either going to come out being a sensory seeker or a sensory avoider. I don't know what the research says. I haven't found any that says it's going to be this way or the other, but just clinically, I see it both ways. So I think that's something really interesting to keep in mind. And there's a research article at the bottom too that we'll cover that talks about the sensory kiddos versus the kids without sensory challenges, and like the different, these families, this mom was on bed rest, this one at this and this and this, and it talks about
we'll include the link to the research article in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'm curious if anyone listening was like, yeah, I was on bed rest. Yeah, my child has sensory processing challenges. Let us know. Like, maybe we'll just make our own research article.
Yeah, in our spare time. Some other things that can impact a child's sensory system would be, like I already mentioned, like trauma or stress. The delivery and birth process can have an impact. We talk a lot about that when we talk about primitive reflexes. And then there's also a genetic component. Some research is showing that there are genetic components when it comes to sensory processing challenges. We always like to say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. A child who is a sensory avoider often has a parent who's also a sensory avoider or a sensory seeker. We see siblings who have sensory processing challenges that are similar or sometimes opposite, but overall there's sensory processing challenges in the family.
Yeah, and I'll just share one more little research article that I think I've talked about before. It's really fascinating. It follows families that were pregnant during this huge New Zealand earthquake. Back in the day, it was like the early, maybe 2011 or something like that. I can't remember exactly when it was, but they followed these families. The moms were all pregnant when this huge, devastating earthquake hit, and the research study came out when the kids were all in kindergarten, and most of them were sensory seekers, I believe, because of all of the stress chemicals that were released during pregnancy, and a lot of them had retained primitive reflexes as well because of the stress. And you think about all the stress chemicals that you have running through your body constantly, those are impacting your child as well. So that's why we always advocate for, living a stress-free life.
But Good luck.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, this is one of those things. Anytime we talk about pregnancy or birth or the impacts that delivery can have on a baby, we always want to just make sure everybody knows this is just information. Bed rest can sometimes be life-saving for the mother and for the baby. Sometimes.
But it's like knowing that information, but like rocking in the rocking chair, like counteracting that,
Sure.
Like, yes, I'm on bed rest, but I'm going to rock in a rocking chair to help still provide some input and movement for
But really baby. What it is, this is just information that if you didn't know this before, now you know, and what can you do about it? That's always our goal.
Yeah, we never you did this and you ruined your child. Like, no,
that's not what we're saying.
Not our MO. It's just, know better, do better. You have the information and you can take it or leave it, but this is just, it's out there.
Yes.
It's out there.
Okay, so how can you support your baby's nervous system development during pregnancy?
Yes. So I think one of the first things is nutrition and making sure that I always say eating a well-balanced diet. And I just remember going to get Taco Bell because I was craving Taco Bell, right?
Yeah.
But it's taking a great prenatal that doesn't have folic acid in it. It has methylated folate and has all of the choline and the omegas, and it has all of the things, because it is really hard to eat a well-balanced diet, especially in your first trimester. Am I right, Claire? Or am I right? Yes, exactly. So finding a good prenatal. I love Needed. I love Ritual. Those are my personal go-tos. If anyone else has any favorites, let me know. But yeah, just supplementing. A good collagen powder, good protein powder.
Yeah, I think in today's world, because our soils are so depleted, because of our food industry, it's so hard to get what we actually need for optimal health. even when we're not pregnant. And so then
Yeah.
it's extra hard when you are pregnant. But there are really good supplements out there. You just have to do some research to find the good ones.
Yeah.
And, working with a functional medicine practitioner, if possible, to identify any possible nutrition deficiencies that you might already have so you can supplement specifically with those would be great. I was listening to a podcast recently, and most of us are deficient in vitamin D and I can't remember if it was K2 or K3, and magnesium.
Yeah.
And so most of us should already be on a supplement for those ones because of our lifestyle, and we're inside all the time. So just looking at your nutrition, looking at supplements, and
talking to your doctor.
Making sure they're safe. Yeah.
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 Anyways, again, not medical advice. Just keep that in mind.
Yep. This is one of those things, like, these are our opinions.
Yeah.
So do your own research.
Yes. Okay, physical activity, we talked about this with the bed rest thing, but even just walking. Walking is fantastic.
Yep.
Throw a curb walk in there if you want, especially later on. At
I've told
35.
this story before. I have a very, very clear memory of being at Rachel's house. She was pregnant with Trip. And you were probably like 2 weeks away or something like that, and trying to get him head down, and we were going for a walk, and I just remember you walking on the curb. And it was just I just have this clear memory of looking at you, and you're just walking on the curb.
It worked. Honestly, I am a huge advocate of getting the baby not just head down, but ideally LOA, left occiput anterior, so that way they just slide right out. And I feel like that has such an impact on like preventing back labor and just making it as a quick and smooth delivery. So
in general, we're not meant to be sedentary.
Correct.
Our bodies are designed to move, so going on walks, finding a good workout program that you like. Lifting weights has been shown to have a huge positive impact on pregnancy. Yoga is a great one. Swimming.
Yeah. Just moving. Just any way that you can move.
Yep.
Aim for like a minimum of 30 minutes per day if possible.
Yep.
And even like as you're getting later in your pregnancy, avoiding this like reclined position and instead being like leaning over. That can be really helpful too, of keeping baby in the right position. But really the goal is to get baby in that good position, and moving is really helpful.
Yeah, I was gonna say, sitting for prolonged periods, definitely not ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable too. No one wants to sit for long periods of time.
Sure.
Speaking of which, let's move on to the next, not speaking of which. This one kind of, explains itself, but avoiding harmful substances, smoking, chewing, drinking, taking prescription drugs, toxins, I feel like everything is toxic these days. So, err on the side of caution. I always say, just, don't. If you're cautious, if you're nervous,
just don't.
Yeah.
Stress management. So we talked a little bit about stress, and those stress chemicals that go through you are going to go through your baby. So managing your stress as much as possible is going to be very important. Whether that's through like taking a yoga class where you work on the mindfulness training, maybe you go to therapy, maybe you get off the screen, maybe you ditch all your social media, because every time you look at social media, you're comparing yourself to other people, which I do all the time, and I'm like, I gotta get off of here. But managing your stress, going outside is a great way to manage your stress. Really, just go outside.
Definitely. Next one is adequate sleep, which again is easy for us to say but difficult to really do, especially during pregnancy. But personally, I have like all of the things to help me sleep. I have a knee pillow. I have a heat pack that I would like put under my belly to like rest my belly on it, because I didn't like the pregnancy pillows. They were uncomfortable, and a blanket to like prop your head up, and like, I don't know.
Yeah, sleep is when your body and your brain goes through like the repair process.
Yeah.
It's very important.
And definitely look into mouth breathing. If you wake up and you are mouth breathing and snoring, that's a whole nother thing. That's going to be a whole nother episode. But again, keep that in mind too during pregnancy as well.
Yeah.
Sleep.
Yeah. Getting regular checkups, regular prenatal care, just making sure that everything is going the way that it should.
Yeah, and I just think if you're not peeing in the cup and getting your blood pressure done at every appointment that you go to, ask them why not. I just felt like that was such an important part of my own journeys, and I did like more of a holistic approach in a conventional way, and it was like the best of both worlds, where it was like, I'm not going to do this, but yeah, I'll pee in a cup and you can take my blood pressure every time. So I don't know, do what feels right.
Then those are non-invasive anyways.
I know, but it can help catch like preeclampsia and you know,
absolutely.
all those things, and tons of other things. Again, I'm not a doctor. I wish I was, but I'm not. This is just like our own opinions.
Yeah, got to throw that in there every 5 minutes.
Every 5 minutes, take it or leave it.
A couple of additional tips. Again, our opinions. Avoid the glucose drink. There are other drinks that you can drink for that specific test. I don't know what we talked about, like honey.
Pineapple juice, organic pineapple juice. I know some people, I mean, again, take it or leave it, but this was something, I mean, if you look at the ingredient list of the glucola, like food dyes, and I feel like one of them has like formaldehyde in it or something. I don't know. I just personally, it's just something that I prefer to avoid. And my midwives were fine with that. They were like, great, here's some pineapple juice, here's some...
You're just trying to get that blood sugar to spike, and there's a lot of different ways to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. I always say crawl. During pregnancy from the start. Again, not only does it help get baby in an optimal birthing position, it's a very innate movement pattern to do. It's also very organizing for the nervous system. It can help relieve stress. It can help just make you feel better. And just from the start.
So there are some research articles that we included in here. We will link them in the show notes. But basically, it's just talking about looking at pregnancy and birth and the correlation, causation, coincidence.
Ooh, I don't like to use those
connection.
Terms. Yeah.
One of those any of those C words to sensory processing disorder. This one specifically found that both children with SPD and ASD had a relatively high incidence of mothers with health-related problems or high maternal stress. So that's really interesting to think about, you know, that stress, just those stress chemicals going through your body on a regular basis can have such a huge impact.
And the next one is the association between C-sections and sensory integration dysfunction in preschool children. Again, these are small studies, but they're important to at least bring to light, and hopefully we can get more research done on these topics. But the prevalence of sensory integration dysfunction among the preschool children and the prevalent rates of vestibular disorders, tactile overresponsivity, and proprioceptive disorders. And so what they were sharing in this article, the conclusion was that C-sections can significantly increase the risk of proprioceptive disorders in preschool children, especially in boys. And again, this isn't to say, oh, you got a C-section. Oh, no. You know, it's like, no. You got a C-section. Everyone's doing fine and thriving. Here's what to look for in the future. If your child does start to struggle in school, if they are struggling in X, Y, and Z, at least you have that understanding of like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember these two chicks were talking about C-sections and primitive reflexes or sensory processing. Let's look at that. Let's do a deep dive into that.
These two chicks.
These two chicks. Yeah.
Another one was the occurrence of SPD in children, depending on the type and time of delivery. And like Rachel said, pretty small, 75 children. And they compared children who were born premature, children who were delivered C-section, compared to ones who were born, quote unquote, on time by natural means. So vaginal at that 40-week-ish mark. And it was done by a questionnaire filled out by the children's parents. And SPD was detected among 84% of the preborns, the premature born children, and among 80% of the children delivered by C-section. So it's pretty high statistics, I feel like.
I thought so too. Yeah. And then one more here, the prenatal and perinatal risk variables of sensory processing disorder. And this is the article that I was talking about earlier that talks about the bed rest and like all of the different areas. And this one specifically shows that children with the prenatal and perinatal history with bleeding, intrauterine infections, cervical insufficient or placental abruptions, APGAR scores at 1 minute of less than 7, abnormal birth weight should be under specialized multidisciplinary supervision at least until they start school. So it goes through the different areas and it talks about, and there's a table there, I put it in there for us, and it just shows the connection of like, oh, here's a C-section, here's the percentage, here's bed rest, here's the percentage. Again, this is a small sample study, which means that we need to do more research.
Of course,
and
always.
I think, with the rate of C-sections increasing, I think that's really important to identify as well.
Is that rate still increasing? Do you know?
Yeah.
Dang.
It's like 1 in 3, I think.
Dang.
Yeah.
Anyways, the more you know.
Yeah.
We have other episodes on infants and toddlers and how to support an infant sensory system and a toddler sensory system. So I feel like now that we've done this episode, we've covered the entire span.
Yeah, we have.
Because we also have episodes for adults and supporting an adult sensory system as well. So
yeah, really the key takeaway, don't be stressed. Sleep, eat.
Oh, we didn't talk about hydration. Stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated.
Make sure you have enough electrolytes.
And have a natural vaginal birth. Easy. Done. Just kidding. We're just kidding. Okay, we're totally just kidding.
Like someone's going to be mad.
I know. We always ruffle feathers with these topics, and I'm sorry, but it's just...
Yeah.
It is what it is. I don't know.
Control what you can control.
Exactly.
And then have the knowledge to support when things are out of your control. How about that?
Very perfect.
Okay, great.
Okay, Claire, how'd we do?
Amazing.
Great. Thanks.
I already have questions that I wrote down.
Oh, do you want to ask them for the episode?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you talked about bed rest,
Yes.
are you talking about, well, first, can you define bed rest while you're pregnant? Is
Yes.
that what you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
So bed rest during pregnancy, you are maybe having a medical complication. Maybe baby is struggling for some reason, or you are struggling for some reason.
Or you're having early labor.
And the doctor says you need to go on bed rest, which basically means you need to stay in bed, take it easy, relax, don't move, don't put too much pressure on the baby.
You only get up to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. So that's what bed rest during pregnancy would be.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. Next question. Why should you always pee in a cup at every appointment?
Yes, and my thought is that it can be preventative measures for them to catch something like preeclampsia, which your ketones change in your urine, and they can catch a lot of things. And I mean, this is totally my own experience, but the doctor that I went to, that I was doing that, and my sister-in-law was pregnant at the same time and wasn't doing that, and she ended up having to go back into the hospital with preeclampsia. And I was like, well, weren't you peeing in a cup every time? She's like, no. And I was like, oh, I thought everyone did. I just thought that everyone was peeing in a cup in every appointment.
And what's preeclampsia?
High blood pressure. And so it raises your blood pressure, your feet get all swollen, your whole body gets all swollen, and generally it leads to an earlier delivery. And it's, it's a medical complication, pretty serious medical complication. We had our in-person listener questions. So if any of you listening have questions about this, I know you can leave questions or comments in Spotify, on YouTube. I don't think on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, because Apple's not as good.
Yeah, but you can leave reviews, and we really do appreciate your reviews and letting us know your thoughts about these topics and, what you want to hear more about, what you want to hear less about, maybe, and yeah.
We also love it when you screenshot that you are listening and tag us on social media. We're at All Things Sensory Podcast. Did you already tell them to subscribe?
No.
Make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening and share this episode with a friend.
We hope this was helpful. Take it with a grain of salt, and we hope that you can take our humor also with a grain of salt too.
Take what you need and leave the rest.
Exactly.
And do your own research.
Please. Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay, love you so much. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for listening to All Things Sensory by Harkla.
If you want more information on anything mentioned in the show, head over to harkla.co/podcast to get the show notes.
If you have any follow-up questions, the best place to ask those is in the comments on the show notes or message us on our Instagram account, which is at harkla_family or at All Things Sensory Podcast. If you just search Harkla, you'll find us there.
Like we mentioned before, our podcast listeners get 10% off their first order at Harkla. Whether it's for one of our digital courses or one of our sensory swings, the discount code SENSORY will get you 10% off. That's SENSORY.
Head to harkla.co/sensory to use that discount code right now.
We are so excited to work together to help create confident kids all over the world. While we make every effort to share correct information, we're still learning.
We will double check all of our facts, but realize that medicine is a constantly changing science and art.
One doctor or therapist may have a different way of doing things from another.
We are simply presenting our views and opinions on how to address common sensory challenges, health-related difficulties, and what we have found to be beneficial that will be as evidence-based as possible.
By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or your child.
Consult your child's pediatrician or therapist for any medical issues that he or she may be having.
This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast.
Thanks so much for listening.